Well, good evening, and welcome to the November 12th, 2014 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I am Michael Lay, Chairman of the Commission, and at this time I would like to introduce the members of the Commission who are here. To my right is Commissioner Anderson, to my far left is Commissioner Karras, and to my immediate left is Commissioner Culbertson. We expect Commissioner Berg to be here as well this evening. From city staff, we have Kathy Zerniak, and the agenda we have before us is fairly abbreviated this evening. But the first item is approval of the minutes from our October 8th, 2014 Plan Commission meeting. It was sent out to us in advance of the meeting. I would ask if there's any corrections, deletions, additions, or any revisions to those minutes. If not, a motion would be in order to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approval of the minutes of October 8th, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries to approve the minutes. The next item is, first item is a public hearing and action on consideration of tentative and final approval of a St. James Church subdivision. I would ask whether or not the members of the commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter.
No.
Seeing none, we will move to proceed. At this point, I would like to swear in anybody who would like to appear on the public hearing of the St. James Church subdivision. Okay, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give or have previously given is true and to the best of your knowledge? Thank you very much. The representatives that I have on my list to appear are Randy Daniel, President of the Church Council, and Ann Lynn, a church representative. Ms. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Daniel is traveling on business, and so he is not able to be with us tonight. My name is Ann Lynn. I am an attorney. I am also a member of St. James Lutheran Church, and with me this evening I have our pastor, Richard Homer, and also Peter Clemens, who's a member of our congregation as well and very involved with this process. Just to briefly walk you through the reason for our petition and the details of it this evening. And the staff report was just absolutely excellent and completely covered everything that I'm about to say. What I've put up on the screen is the existing layout of our church property. We're located at 1380 North Waukegan Road, approximately a little more than 14 acres. And the easiest way to look at our property is to think of it as two large rectangular parcels. The southerly rectangular parcel actually is 2 lots. The northerly rectangular parcel, which is this area that I'm pointing to now, is where the church building is located. And that is a single parcel of property, approximately 7 acres, slightly more. The southerly rectangle is divided currently into 2 lots. The front lot right here is 1.41 acres, and it's already a divided lot. That was the location of what we at St. James referred to as the Little House parcel, because up until just a couple of years ago, it was the location of a small single-family home that was owned by the church. It was vacant for the last few years of its existence, and then we received permits to demolish it. So that is a vacant lot. The remainder of that southern rectangle, which is approximately 5.4 acres, I'm sorry, 5.02 acres, is vacant. It is primarily wetland property. That is the church property as it exists today. We come before you in a petition for a minor subdivision, which is actually partially a re-subdivision. The property had been subdivided in previous years because of the Little House parcel. But because we've had an offer from our neighbor immediately abutting our property to purchase about half of our property, 7 surplus acres. And in order to do that and configure it in a way that is most advantageous not only to the prospective buyer, but also to the church, we need to create a new lot. And so that's the reason for the minor subdivision. And this is the proposed reconfiguration of the church property. The new lot that would be created is behind the northern rectangle that I described. And on this diagram, it is shown as Lot 2. It's 2.43 acres immediately to the west of the church property. And that, as I said, would be a new lot created in this process. The Little House parcel, I should have said before I started this portion, is an existing lot and does not change. So in your overheads and other items in your packet, that is not included in the parcel that's, or the property that's being subdivided here, because it already is a subdivided lot. The church would retain the 5+ acres on which sits the church building to the east portion of the north rectangle. And the south rectangle, the rear 2/3 of that, which again is another 5 acres, and that's the wetland, primarily wetland portion, would be sold along with that new Lot 2. So the purchaser of our property, our neighbor, would be purchasing an L-shaped piece of land, kind of like this, and the church will retain the other L-shaped piece of land. In addition, as we've had our discussions going forward with our neighbor, it became apparent that it would be really advantageous to the church, and she was in agreement with this, to carve out a 10-foot portion of land immediately to the south of the church parcel, along the north line of that south triangle. And the reason for that is that lot line between the two, I'm sorry, rectangle, not triangle. The lot line between the two rectangles is immediately adjacent to our parking area. So this extra 10 feet gives us a little bit of a buffer on our parking area to the south. So that would take place, it's really a lot line shift, but it would take place at the same time were you to approve our minor subdivision, creating the new parcel in the back of the church. So that's what we're proposing. Obviously, it's very advantageous to the church. We will receive funds for the sale of what is really surplus land that can be used to endow the church and its benevolence programs in the community and also in the Lake County community and around the region. We're a very far-reaching church for many, many years to come. So that's really a positive. It's obviously positive for our neighbor because she intends to join it with her existing land. Very important to note that as a part of our agreement with her, there will be a restrictive covenant placed on the deed. The property will be prohibited from development or sale during her lifetime. She's in her 50s, so her lifetime hopefully will be quite a while. And at the end of that period, upon her passing, her heirs will be obligated to give the church a right of first refusal to repurchase the land, should the church wish to do that at that time. So the property, in effect, to the passerby will remain unchanged. But the other benefit to the city of Lake Forest is that 7 of the 14 acres of this parcel, which have been tax exempt for many years, will return to the tax rolls. And the final piece is that, as I described, the rear 2/3 of the south rectangle being primarily wetland, if there were to be future development at some point in the distant future, that will be impacted by the fact that that's wetland property. So any potential development would be negated by that as well. I think I've covered every point that I intended to do. I'm happy to take any questions now or later on in the proceedings. And as I said, Pastor Homer and Mr. Clemens are here as well, and they might be able to add more.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy, any issues or comments?
I'm not sure I have much to add to that. Just in summary, the proposed subdivision does create one additional lot. It does shift a property line just to give the church a little bit more room there by their driveway. No development is proposed. If development were proposed, this would need to come back for further consideration, further re-subdivision. And it's a straightforward subdivision. We are recommending tentative and final approval in one action because there are no infrastructure improvements, no further technical studies that need to be done. So you do have a recommendation and findings to support that in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Move on then to any questions or requests for clarification from commissioners to the petitioner or staff. Jim?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions with regard to access. Is there any contemplation for any access dedicated or easements to the property at this point?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
No, there won't be any change at all to the property because of the restrictive covenants, so no.
Okay, so if that were to be developed in the future, they would either have to come back to the church for access or access it through the property to the west?
Exactly, and that would need to be, taken care of at the time of any future development.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one last question. As far as the wetlands portion of the property, do you have an estimate? Has that been designated by an engineer, or is that just water on the surface? And do you know what portion of that?
Do we know what?
Designated by,
Sir, could you please come up to the mic and identify yourself, please?
Pete Clemens, member of the church. The wetlands have been reviewed by both the county and also the Army Corps of Engineers, and it is under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps.
Is that the whole property, or what portion?
That rectangular lot, it's probably minimally 50% of that lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Further questions?
None for me.
Okay. I have a question. Is the proposed purchaser of the property that would be subdivided, there's conflicting information in our packet. One place it says that the property owner is to the north
I'm
of
sorry.
the property, another says to the west. Could you clarify that?
Right, yeah, that's my error. I drafted the letter that came from our council president, Randy Daniel, and I said to the north. Her property is to the west.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
You access it from the north, but then you keep going and it's behind the church,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So it is, in and of itself, the owner has a very, very large lot at this point.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I have one.
Sure. Lloyd?
Lot 3, Kathy, it's substantially wetlands. Is it potentially a buildable site or not?
I believe we heard that it's about 50%. I believe there is some development potential for that lot. I don't know the quality of the wetlands, but certainly if in the future a developer wanted to come forward with that property, we would look at it. There's always the opportunity perhaps to mitigate some wetlands, but I believe at least a portion of that property toward the eastern end is developable.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Final question, or final comments from the commission on this matter?
Public testimony.
Pardon me?
Public
Oh,
testimony.
yes. Anybody here from the public who wishes to testify on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to discussion by the commission of the petition.
Let me go first. I think this is fairly, well, the staff said simple and straightforward. I don't know if it's simple, but it's straightforward. So I think I understand the the rationale for it, and it all seems to feel pretty logical and straightforward to me.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Agreed.
Okay. Well then, if no further discussion, a motion would be in order to adopt the staff recommendation on page 3 of our staff report.
Also motion.
Okay, it's been moved that the final plat of subdivision meets all applicable requirements to the satisfaction of the city engineer and director of community development, and prior to any future development on parcels, impact fees and all applicable development-related fees must be paid in accordance with a fee schedule in effect at the time of the approval of any such development.
This is tentative and final approval.
Okay,
Second?
it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion to approve indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is next. A review of the existing home occupation or home business standards in the city code. Kathy, would you like to
Sure.
brief us on this?
During a community strategic planning session, a number of issues came up, and some questions came up about whether or not the city allowed home businesses. And in fact, we do. There's been provisions to allow home occupations in the city code for decades, really. And we do know, although the city doesn't require licenses for home businesses, they really essentially fly under the radar. We know that there are many home businesses, just from conversations we've had or situations that we've come across. But out of the strategic planning session, we were asked to have the Plan Commission, number one, to make you aware that we do allow home businesses and there are provisions in the code, and to have you look at those because they haven't been looked at for a long time. There was no specific direction that they need to be amended, but they are really before you tonight just for introduction, just to get your thoughts. Certainly there is some language that we could clean up or update, but we're really looking for your sense on whether these standards do what we want them to do with respect to home businesses. As I mentioned, we do know that there are quite a few home businesses, probably numbering close to 200. We know there are all sorts of home businesses. Most of those take the form of home offices. The city does not do any enforcement, does not require those to be licensed, as I mentioned. The only time we do enforcement is upon a complaint basis. And a few times a year we will get complaints. The home businesses that usually draw complaints are really of two forms. One, a situation where there's equipment or vehicles stored outside, most often related to construction. If there's any kind of staging of employees at the home at the start of the day. And second, if there are retail sales that are excessive. The code does allow some retail sales. In summary, the code requires that the home be the primary residence of the business owner. So it needs to remain a residential use primarily. The code does restrict the square footage, the amount of the home that can be used for a home business, to 30%. The code allows more than one home business, assuming with the condition that that overall limitation not be exceeded by the two uses combined. The code has various provisions that are intended to require that the appearance of the house remain just that, remain the appearance of a residence. So additional entrances, conversion of the house to put in some kind of equipment that would trigger life safety standards that are over and above residential, expansion of a driveway in a way that it would require, that would appear as a parking lot, signage, so various aspects are limited to assure that the house still looks like a house, so that from driving down the street, it still appears to be just another house in the neighborhood. I think from the staff perspective, I won't go through all the standards, but from the staff perspective, these standards have worked well. They have not been overly restrictive, and I think probably the one comment I would have is that probably many people don't know that home businesses are allowed. And I think that's what triggered the question, that a lot of people with changes in technology can work from home. And I think there was the question about, gosh, do we allow that? But many people have figured it out and actually do have home businesses. So again, tonight, really looking for your direction on whether you want us to spend some time on this, areas of the language that you want us to open up or make tighter, any direction. And again, your direction may be that we shouldn't take any action on it.
Okay.
So with that, I'll turn the discussion over to you, Chairman Lay.
Okay. Any, let me ask this, did anything in this draft, or excuse me, of the code that members of the commission reviewed jump out at you that you found either objectionable, or is there anything that you saw that was missing from here, given that it appeared that this was passed several years ago? And also from your comments, Kathy, I take it that there hasn't been any controversy, so to speak, that it was more of a question that came up during the strategic planning process, so that
It was a question, and I think really from the perspective of we should make sure that home businesses are allowed. That was the takeaway I had.
Sure. And if, as you say, there's only been, on average, 2 complaints a year, that would say to me that that's not a burning issue, at least for, that we know about. But any commissioner have any comments or thoughts after your review of this?
I don't, actually. I think the whole theme of this is we need to maintain that this is a residence and the residential appearance and the limitations on the use within that residence. And I don't think it's necessarily too constraining. On the other hand, I think it's appropriate as the way it is. But I guess my question would be, how do you enforce sort of the external things, like a whole bunch of cars parked out front because they're having a private sale of, I don't know, golf equipment or whatever, women's clothing, periodically. Is that something that, I mean, how does the city, or for that matter, the community and neighbors, how is that monitored or enforced?
The code does allow some residential sales on a limited basis, and we have a couple situations like that in the community.
But I think the issue that I have is sort of the external impact of it. So if you've got 7 cars or 10 cars piled up in front of the driveway, I don't know if that ever happens. I mean, I've never actually experienced anything like this where that would be problematic, but.
We do have a couple situations where they take advantage of the ability to have a couple sales
Yeah.
a year. And in those cases, to be honest, it's treated almost as if someone's having a party. They would call us, notify us, let the police know, but it's on a limited basis, and that's limited by the code. So we do have those situations, but it's not unlike someone having a special event at their house.
Okay.
So those seem to be manageable. Again, we have had a few situations where the provisions of the ordinance do not seem to be followed, and those sales are more often. And then we actually have the ability to do some enforcement because they're not following the regulations in the code.
And if there was a complaint, then it would be up to the discretion of either your department or the police department, Kathy, as to whether or not a citation could be or would be issued?
And our process is, if we do receive a complaint and we suspect there's a home business, and for instance, perhaps there's outdoor storage of construction materials, our first course of action will be to send a letter to the homeowner and give them a copy of the code provisions and let them know that home businesses are permitted and they need to follow these regulations. And most often with that, we get compliance.
Okay.
But yes, we do have the opportunity, actually, community development can issue citations. We do have an administrative hearings officer, so that would normally be how we deal with situations where they're, after a courtesy notice and some effort to explain the regulations, if there was continued abuse, we would take that course of action.
Okay.
Kathy, you mentioned signage earlier and lighting. Does the ordinance specifically address those? I didn't see that in here.
It's the language that says the house needs to appear as a residence. So we don't allow signage other than in some cases plaques that are right up against the wall near a door, so they're not visible from the street. But signage that would be in the front yard or something visible from the street is not permitted because that wouldn't be consistent with the residential character.
Using that example, are there some restrictions on the signage, size, or what can be portrayed in the signage, or plaque, as you called it?
Not specifically, that's something we could address. Normally, we don't get those kinds of requests, but the few that we've gotten really tend to be almost like brass plaques or something like that.
Like Dr.
But that's,
So-and-so? Or
but that's something we could certainly look into.
Another question would be, is the grandfather clause really relevant anymore?
Yeah, I
That's-
was thinking the
It could
same.
be struck. couldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. That's all I can think of right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
my only question or comment around this, and it accommodates it for the most part, I think, but running an internet sales business, one of the provisions here, which I think goes to that, is limited amounts of goods, commodities, or stock in trade. That's somewhat general,
Yes.
but so I don't know if that language could potentially be tightened up a little bit, given the proliferation of internet sales and the possibility of people using their garages for storage of a lot of goods and a lot of UPS trucks coming back and forth. But that would be the only thing in addition to the prior comments that I would have a request of either clarification or tighten the language up on.
On those same lines, that's item number 9, limited, where it says limited amounts of goods. Has that ever been tested as to what that means, Kathy?
Again, we don't get involved unless we get an enforcement complaint, and I can't say that I recall a complaint on that piece. It's really traffic from excessive sales or the construction vehicles or equipment.
But wouldn't
But-
that be also constrained by the 30% of space limitation? So if you had a large, your internet sales are taking up a large chunk of the house, that would clearly violate the 30% rule. So, I don't know. I think your point's valid in terms of maybe do we need to be more specific, but there are still enough limits around this provision that would contain that, I think.
And I'm a little confused, actually, Kathy, about retail sales are prohibited, right?
They are, but the opportunity for.
Private sales.
For private sales, for special sales.
But that's only potentially 4 times a year, right?
Correct.
4 days a
Yeah.
year. So again, another
So
limitation or
so you really
restriction.
couldn't do, yeah.
You wouldn't have UPS trucks going back and forth daily or weekly.
And having excessive deliveries would also be something that would be contrary. But again, this was written prior to the internet, so
Right.
it may be, just hearing your comments, we take a look at it, do some cleanup of provisions and look at signage and look at the whole concept of retail sales and see if we need to,
Well, now that you put all that together, I think the 4 times a year, somebody, I don't know, maybe selling something small or whatever, some service on the internet, there is an inconsistency perhaps around that, or maybe it isn't, and maybe it needs to be that way, that limited. But I think that's a valid point. I was thinking about deliveries. Frankly, residents in this town have a lot of special deliveries, and it'd be hard to track some of that. So,
Well, and even with overnight letters and other
That's my point.
documents, I mean, it's not unusual to see, overnight delivery services coming to a particular house or group of houses.
regularly, yeah.
Regularly, like 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 times a week. So, and do you ever get complaints about that?
I can't say that we do.
Yeah, I would think, okay, good.
I do want to ask one other question. I'm not at all suggesting this. I really just want to reaffirm. This process has been, from the staff's perspective, working well without any licensing or registration requirement. And that seems to be a simple way to allow people to have home businesses. And I'm just looking for confirmation that the commission is comfortable with retaining that as really almost a self-policing unless there's a violation.
I think that's fair.
I feel
I think we
comfortable
want
with
a funny, but we have an overlap here where there are many, many people, I'm sure, in this town, in this city, that are actually working remotely or can work remotely and may not do it regularly, but they do it frequently. And that's just how and where they carry out their work, accessing their connection to the office or whatever, the regular office, via the computer. So there's this side of, working from home as opposed to having a business from your home. And to me, in today's technology, it's a little bit hard to define where that line is divided. Clearly, I understand this notion of if you're selling a product and there's all that, and everything you do is from that home, takes on a different character than if you're just simply working remotely from home. But it's over time, it's going to feel a little bit more blurred, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, my perspective is I do think it's pretty reasonable to allow people to run businesses from their home, whether they be, in my case, my wife has a business from home. It's a small business. It involves some remote sales, and there's no traffic, there's no additional constraint on the use of the home. She runs it from the kitchen table, basically. But where I think this is changing, to your point, is with internet sales and perhaps an abuse of that.
Okay.
At this point, I think it would be probably unreasonable on our parts to overly constrain people unless there was a series or a pattern of violations that started to become more frequent.
And it doesn't feel like we're trying to solve a big problem here.
No.
Well, Kathy, in light of that, should we send it back to you, and then based on this discussion and any other discussion you would have, we leave it to your discretion as to whether you feel any revisions to this code should be brought back?
And I think we will bring it back. I
Okay.
won't promise to do it next month, because you have a couple big things coming up, but we will look at this language. I think any provision of the code, it's good to look at it once in a while, even if it's just to change some of the language. And I don't know if you have any public comment on this item? No. But with that direction, we'll go back and play with it a little and make some tweaks and then bring it back before you at an appropriate time for a public hearing.
The one thing, this is sort of a silly observation, but I think there's not clearly, I don't think there's a lot of awareness of this. So I don't know, is there some need to do some kind of broader communication?
Actually, I was thinking along the same lines, that at the time you hold a public hearing, obviously that would be noticed, your recommendation, even if it's just clean up language, would need to go to the city council for adoption. We could certainly do an article in the Dialogue.
Yeah, something like that would be helpful.
Making people aware, once we have the new regulations. So we'll do that. And we'll also share that with, we meet with the realtors quarterly, and that might be good information for them to have as well.
Very good. Well, that will conclude our consideration of item number 4. Moving on to number 5, is there any public testimony on non-agenda items? Please come forward and tell us your name and address.
Dan Sebald, 560 Ivy Court in Ward 1. Would you like me to swear in or anything? No? Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to speak about two items that are related, and one is local, one is regional. I'll speak about the first one very quickly, and my intention here is to hopefully influence you to make a motion to, in the future, to send to the City Council. The first item regards a parcel of land which is basically the Wesley Farm homestead. Now, I'm going to this up. So it's this parcel of land. Basically, on the south is Wesley Road, to the east is Ridge Road, to the north is Highway 60, and to the west is a subdivision. What I would like to see is that plot of land rezoned to agricultural. Now, there's no land in Lake Forest that is zoned as agricultural, and I would like to see some zoned as agricultural. And there is such a classification in Lake County, it's AG. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, this plot of land was slated for development of some type of vineyards, kind of residential housing, something like that. And for some reason that never took place. I opposed it at the time. And probably because the market wouldn't support this development. So basically that's it. I'd like to see this zoned as agricultural. It's a piece of land that seems that people are trying to make a profit on, but all it wants to be is farmland. It's currently used for farmland, I believe. The second item is Highway 53 extension into Lake County, something that I strongly oppose. And I'm raising this issue because the state is talking about funding planning for the extension of Highway 53. And if this does go through, this extension, this would be a $3 billion fiasco. It's not the type of development, road construction that's needed. It never was, and especially now in a time when companies like Motorola are picking up and leaving from Libertyville, going downtown. The youth of today do not want to live out in the suburbs. They want to live in cities like Chicago, New York, Denver. It's just a bad expenditure of money. And what I would like to see is the city of Lake Forest write a letter to the Highway Commission, or whatever it is, the Toll Commission, opposing it. And I'll come back to that, but just let me illustrate to you so this is Highway 53 here, coming there. And that's Long Grove right there. So this is an example. I'm assuming that little blue dot there would be an exit entry ramp. And to me, this is just not a place that you could put something like that. To the east here, this is Half Day Road right here. And it narrows down into 2 lanes. through here without a shoulder and then extends over further. Just imagine having an exit ramp or an entry ramp there. And there's some people who support this extension, what seems like out of spite or schadenfreude for Long Grove, that because other parts of the county have highways like 43, 41, that Long Grove should have such a thing as well. And I just don't feel we need that type of thing. So coming back to the, I just want to mention the village of Wadsworth in 2012 submitted a letter to the Illinois Toll Highway Authority support of Route 53 extension. President Rybeck proposed it, and someone else active in support is Lake County Board Chairman David Stolman. Both of these individuals ran for Lake County Treasurer in the last election. The only statement I could find attributed to Lake Forest was in 1996 when it supported the Highway 53 extension. And it's been 20 years now. We see the type of traffic that we get from these types of road developments. They claim that it alleviates traffic. I believe it only increased traffic in the roads going east-west. So again, I would encourage you to consider making a statement on this. It's a large expenditure of money, and it could be environmentally detrimental to Long Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the, okay. Kathy, what, with respect to the first item that was brought up, the Riley parcel, to do what was just suggested here would require a petition to rezone that. Where would such a petition, where would it be originated?
That property is privately owned,
Right?
so the petition would need the consent of the property owners. The city has not made a practice of going out and rezoning property. So that property was previously proposed for development. Open space was a part of that. There was some component that was going to remain agricultural. But it really, given that it's private property, it is designated in our comprehensive plan for residential development. So certainly if a petition was filed by the owners, we would bring that forward for consideration by the Plan Commission.
Procedural question, could this,
May I just follow?
Sure,
up?
sure.
What is the current zoning? It's confusing, isn't it?
I believe the current zoning on that property is R4, which is 60,000 square foot lot.
Go ahead.
That's from memory.
so what you're saying is, if a petition would be, let's say, came either from this commission or the city council, would that be ruled out of order for any particular reason?
Normally, the city wouldn't initiate rezoning. That certainly would, normally a request for rezoning comes from the private property owner. And the fact that the comprehensive plan identifies that property as residential would make that difficult for the city to initiate any kind of downzoning action.
I think it would be borderline condemnation or something along those lines.
Eminent domain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, so that would, what you're saying is that's not reasonably done unless there would be a public purpose for doing such. And then if there were a public purpose, then there would have to be compensation to the property owner for what I will call a downzoning. Is that correct?
Correct, and likely an amendment to the comprehensive plan, because currently the comprehensive plan does support the current zoning.
Okay. Then on item number 2, the person testifying here indicated that there was a 96 letter from the city council opining on the Highway 53 extension project. Do you recall that?
I don't, I wasn't here then. And occasionally, the city council will weigh in on regional issues. I would suggest that perhaps the most effective way to communicate the concern or to make that request would be to submit a letter, and if you want to get that to me, I can get that both to the Plan Commission and City Council, because those kind of regional positions are really positions that the City Council would debate and determine whether to weigh in on that.
So that was my question. Do we have any, the word isn't jurisdiction, but any responsibility or accountability potentially for some kind of statement from our
Taking
Plan Commission?
a position on a regional issue would
yeah,
normally come from the
outside of
City
our
Council.
city? Yeah, we can.
Normally, that kind of position on a regional issue would come from the City Council.
City Council, right. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay. Well, then I think if you would like to communicate with the city through Kathy on both of those items, we would encourage you to do that. Okay? That way, we've got something to consider, put on an agenda and that sort of thing. Okay. Thank you for your testimony and appearing. Okay, any other matters to come before us? The consideration of the 2015 Plan Commission meeting schedule, let's put that off till December.
We're still working on that, so we will
Right.
coordinate with you and get you a
Very good.
schedule.
Okay. Those who haven't responded to Kathy on that, please do so. Okay. Okay, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.